Okay, here's my video on replacing engine mounts in a Jaguar XJ8 2001. Now I've already finished the process, so it's just going to be an explanation, but it's good enough for now. If I need to replace the other one, I'll explain how. Okay, so for starters, the engine mount is down there. You can see it right there. It's that thing. There's a bolt on the top, which is like maybe an inch and a half away from the header. So that's a freaking pain in the ass to get a ratchet over, especially if your ratchet is a piece of crap like mine is. That bolt stock is, where is it? It's a 15 mil. But that thing's such a pain in the ass, and make sure you have a good quality socket because this one has so much play. I only get one tick before it doesn't work. Yeah, so you need to undo that bolt, and then underneath the car, let's see, actually, I'm looking at tools. I want to find the size of it so it's easier to do. Okay, here. So you can tell I keep my workspace clean. So this is a T45 star screw head, and there is a hole underneath the car with a plastic plug in the subframe that you need to remove a bolt from. Now, let's see. Where's that? So you can see right there, that hole right there has a hex head. Maybe you can even see it. Yeah, it's right up there. Yeah. And that one needs to be undone. That's the bottom part of the engine mount. And then what I did is I jacked up from the oil pan, but I wouldn't recommend it. It'd be better to jack up from something else. Or if you're going to jack up from the oil pan, make sure you have a big flat piece of wood that's exactly the right size, because this is dented slightly now because I was jacking up from this side. So once you're ready to do it, you want to put it on jack stands on the regular the regular body lift spots, which are right here. And I have them at the lowest setting, but if you can get it higher, it'll probably be easier. You could use the stock. No, you couldn't. So what I would recommend for a lifting point I have a floor jack, which is it's a 4-ton cheap piece of crap that works great, but doesn't lift that high. See, and I would not recommend using particle board because it snaps. And I would recommend using a piece of foam over a piece of like 2x8 underneath the engine compartment or underneath the oil pan if you're going to lift from there, like that one. But that one's too long. So you jack up the oil pan once you undo those two bolts, and then you, this is not the fun part of explaining it. So also for jacking up the frame, I'm sorry, this is just sort of talking head sort of thing and not being very good at this. So to jack up from these points, I'd recommend using the floor jack and push up right there, or I'd recommend pushing up right there, or for me, I jacked up right here when I was figuring out things. I wouldn't recommend that because that's all the weight on one bushing, and it should be fine, but I wouldn't recommend it. Okay, so let's see. And if you try to jack up from over here, you're going to have a pain in the ass because of what I'm going to explain next. So the X308 Jaguar has this nasty, very smart, but pain in the ass feature where the whole subframe is on a pivot. So there's a bushing right here, and then there's some bushings right up here above the spring, and the whole subframe swivels like this so that it can cushion things even more from here. So the engine is even more isolated apart from the engine mount. If you try to do an engine mount and put the jack stands underneath the frame here, the subframe, you cannot get the engine mount out. I'd also recommend taking off the plastic panels in here to get at stuff. I only took them off from up here, and then just wrapped it around the side right here. But in order to take the engine mount out, you have to take out all the bolts, and then you have to jack up the engine as far as it will go, and then you have to go around here or from the top and shove it as far forward as you can get it. You can see like this wire right here, I bent a little bit. Let's see if I can. But basically, you have to jack it up, and you can see how that's the air conditioning compressor, and then above there is the power steering pump, and you have to push it in between those so that it's in between the subframe and it's in this little pocket of space. And then you have to lower the engine back down far, but not all the way, because then it'll be sitting on the frame without an engine mount, and it'll contact things, and it could pinch tubes and wires and stuff. So after you lower it, you have to grab the engine mount and pull it like, okay, let's see. I don't have the old engine mount because it snapped in half and it was full of oily disgustingness, which should be considered. That's why this is here. So let's pretend this is the engine mount. This is significantly larger, but when the engine mount is up like this, you want to turn it sideways and shove it forward as far as it can go in between on the other side of this, in between the frame and those two pumps. And then you lower the engine down, and then you twist it. You try to twist it down, and then pull it through here you want to take off the under covering, and then you can pull it out. Now, of course, it's not that simple because you have to jack it up and down and figure out how to get it right out. And with me, it was a little easier because the old engine mount was ripped in half, so it was slightly shorter. But then the new one, it was just trial and error, shoving it in around and with the engine lowered and seeing if I can fit it in between those two pumps. And then once I got it, I was able to jack it up, and then you can access it and actually put it in the right place. It was a complete pain in the ass, and I would not wish it on anyone. So, yeah, some notes. There's some wires here. You don't want to break these. I believe these are for the ABS braking system. This plastic covering is worn out and not wanting to go back on. Let's see. You want to be careful of this wire because if you snap that, that's bad. Once you get this little wire is delicate. Once you get the engine mount in here, it's really important that you pay attention, because if you stick your hand below here, there's a piece of the frame that's kind of bent down and it's kind of sharp, and it's bent outwards pointing in. And if that sticks, so you want to make sure the engine mount is in this direction with the top pointing this way, but you want to make sure that it doesn't catch on that little piece of metal sticking out, because if it catches on that metal, it can rip the boot, and then you'll have to get a new engine mount, and that'll be a whole bunch of pain in the ass to go again. So after the engine is lowered, slightly lower than where the engine mount usually has it, you shove it in there, you lift it up, and then you can sort of jiggle it and get it through here. Right now there isn't enough space. Yeah, I don't think you could get the engine mount through there right now. There's just, even though it looks like enough space, the engine mounts are deceptively large. Once you get it in there, you want to make sure, and once you jack it up so it's higher, like at least 2 inches higher than where it usually sits, I'd recommend 4 inches, but make sure that you're not pushing it too high, because the transmission will contact with the tunnel and it will start lifting the entire frame, the whole car up. And then it will definitely dent the pan, which is what I did, so don't do that. So once you have the engine mount in there, you want to make sure it's right side up, which is the rubbery side, with the little plastic piece and the bolt sticking out, the one that's sticking outward. And then before you lower it onto there, make sure you put that piece of metal back on. That heat shield is really important because the headers are right here and they get very toasty. And I did that, and I had to redo everything, and I lost the bolt, and I had to go to the hardware store and get a new one. So once you put this back on, you will need another person to push the engine mount so that the bolt goes right in, because when I put it in, the engine mount was off by about an eighth of an inch to a quarter of an inch. So you have to get someone with a screwdriver or pry bar to push it slightly as you lower the jack slowly. And once the hole goes through, I would recommend not putting it all the way down onto the mount, but only part of the way down onto the mount, just so the bolt is picking through so you have more access through here. And the back of the engine mount in there has a hole in it, so if you push the bolt too far back there, it will fall into the subframe and it will get lost forever, and there's a 50-50 chance it will fall into the subframe and get lost. Sometimes it falls all the way through, but it doesn't always. So once you have the bolt on there, you tighten it up, you tighten up, you put in the star one that uses, where is it? You put in the star bolt that goes up in the bottom, tighten that. There's a little plastic piece that goes back up in the bottom. I don't think I mentioned that, but that is important if you want to keep purity. And then you tighten everything up. I would recommend using thread locker. I don't know the torque specs, but I tighten it up until I feel like I tighten it up as much as I can with like a tool like this. Oh, thank God that didn't drop in there. That would suck. So you want to tighten it up until it feels like it's tight enough. Until I think it's probably about 80 foot-pounds. Don't quote me on that, but it's probably about that much. And have fun fitting a fucking torque wrench in there, because you will not be able to. I'm sorry I'm swearing, but even fitting this is impossible, and anything bigger than this is impossible because of AC lines like this one, and power steering lines, and this little lip. Oh yeah, and you can see the little lip that can catch on the engine mount right there. It's just a little piece of metal that sticks out. I was thinking about hammering it in, but I couldn't get a hammer in there, so I didn't. Yeah, that's the gist of it, I think. Is there anything else? I tried moving the steering rack to see if I can get it in from the other side, but I couldn't. So, yeah, that's no fun. But I took off most of the steering rack, and as a note, the steering column does not want to go farther, and they used you can kind of see way down there. Yeah, you probably can't, but there's a knuckle made of aluminum going onto a steel shaft, which is a stupid idea, but it doesn't matter because you don't need to move that, and I moved it, which was not a good idea, but I did it anyway. And yeah, I'd also recommend moving this off to the side. If you undo these 4 bolts, I think they're 10 mil. You can wrap this around and put it over here, and that will give you a little bit more extra space. If you ever choose to do shocks, I would also recommend removing this because it gets in the way of these bolts. And it's really simple. It's only 3 bolts, and you don't have to disconnect tubes. Yeah. Shocks are another thing, though. I can talk about that later, though. Okay, thanks for watching this long tirade on how to replace engine mounts.